Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer.
Well, hello everybody, hello, and welcome to episode 151 of the Dudes and Beer podcast, coming at you live from Austin, Texas. I am Chris Jordan, your host. Tonight in the studio with me is the stalwart Stephen Bishop.
What's up, listeners?
We will be having on Skype tonight our good friend Rusty Lozano from the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano. He is also a behavioral therapist and owner and head of the Center for Biofeedback and Behavioral Therapy up in the Addison, Dallas area. We will be talking to him about issues facing our children in America today, everything from video gaming to study habits to the sexting trend going on with kids, and of course the latest rash of school shootings, things like that. Before we get to that, though, let's get into our new segment that we have at the top of every show. And for those of you that like to follow the bouncing ball right on over to dudesandbeer.com/news. That is our new section on the website, our new news blog, that basically lists all of the articles that we read here in the Week in the News segment every week. It's got hot links to the actual articles, so you can read the full thing, get a little bit of news in your life. We post all kinds of funny stuff, as well as some wild science stuff, some stuff from the strange, well as things hitting the news wire. So let's go ahead and go through that. The news of this last week from The Guardian came out that a white powder letter was sent to Meghan Markle and treated as a hate crime. Police say they are treating a racist hate crime letter containing white powder sent to Meghan Markle, which sparked an anthrax scare. The letter was received this month at St. James Palace in central London. The powder inside was found to be harmless after being examined by experts. It is understood the package contained a racist note and was received on the 12th of February. In a statement on the same day, Scotland Yard said officers are also investigating an allegation of malicious communications which relates to the same package and is being treated as a racist hate crime. From spacewar.com, the U.S. is ready for possible space wars, says National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. On Wednesday at a meeting of the National Space Council that the United States would prepare for any conflict that took place in space. Quote, due to competitor and adversary actions, the space domain is increasingly contested. Space has now joined land, sea, and air as a war-fighting domain. We prefer the conflict not to extend to space, but the United States will be prepared if it does. End quote. National Security Director also said earlier in the meeting, Vice President Mike Pence said the United States should be as dominant in space as on Earth. And in June, the U.S. Air Force declared the creation of the position of Deputy Chief of Staff for Space Operations in order to assemble multiple functions and ensure the United States stays dominant in space. Exactly 10 years ago, on February 21st, the U.S. first blasted a satellite using the RIM-161 Standard Missile System, an experimental strike platform brought to modern warfare to space, brought warfare to a whole new level. Out of NPR, cave art may have been the handiwork of Neanderthals. It turns out that the cave art being found in Spain all over walls was actually from Neanderthals and could have been painted approximately 45,000 years ago. Out of ABC, we have a missing CDC employee that left work sick 10 days ago and has not been seen since. Now, granted, this article came out about 5 days ago, so it's still been quite a few days, but there has been no update about his whereabouts or anything like that. He left work early feeling sick on February 12th, the Atlanta police said, and has not been seen by family or friends since.
That's weird.
That's absolutely weird.
Yeah.
And actually, oddly enough, like minutes after I posted that, my ex from high school, Margaret Guibuerto, actually posted that she knows the guy. She sees him jogging on the. She knows him. He lives up around the corner from her and jogs, or at least jogged on the jogging path on the nature trail near her house.
Dude, what a small world.
Out of NBC, deputy at Florida high school where 17 were killed, quote, never went in and resigns. The Broward County sheriff, who was assigned as the school resource officer, was apparently outside of the school as the shooting happened last week. Also out of Broward County from Fox News is an updated report on this saying that deputies were supposedly told not to enter Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School unless they had body cameras on. In a Monday evening release, host Laura Ingraham revealed in an exclusive that Broward County Sheriff deputies were supposedly told, quote, not to enter Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School unless they had body cameras on, end quote, which they did not have. Ingraham also revealed that police, quote, lost radio transmissions during the school shooting, which also happened at the mass shooting at Fort Lauderdale Airport last year, also in Broward County. So a couple curious things there. I mean, number one, it'd be interesting if the Broward County sheriffs had body cameras.
Right.
They don't. They don't. So don't go in unless you have a body camera on.
Which you know we don't have in the first place.
Which you know is a piece of equipment you do not have.
Right. You can't even go to the station and get it.
Out of CNN, InfoWars' main YouTube channel is 2 strikes away from being banned. This is actually updated. They are now 1 strike away from being banned. They have gotten 2 strikes in the last week. If you get 3 strikes within a month, your channel is banned permanently. Right now, they have been banned from revenue. They have been made to where for the next 2 weeks they cannot post any new content. That is what they're up against right now. The Alex Jones InfoWars biggest YouTube account received 1 strike for the video about David Hogg focusing a strong voice saying that he was a crisis actor.
Right.
And that, of course, goes under their bullying aspect. Right. And the video was stricken. Yeah. They posted another about it. Yeah. That was stricken, and that's when they were given the warning.
It's one thing when you get told once, but when you keep doing it after being told.
When you keep doing it after being told, you're poking bears.
Yeah, right.
And there's not going to be much that you can do to change that, folks.
Yeah, exactly. You're obviously...
Pardon me as I use my awesome new lighter from Babalu Cigars.
I thought you were trying to stun me.
Yeah, right? Out of Stat News, with DNA from a museum specimen, scientists reconstruct the genome of a bird extinct for 700 years. Scientists at Harvard University have assembled the first nearly complete genome of the little bush moa, a flightless bird that went extinct soon after the Polynesians settled New Zealand in the late 13th century.
The bush moa.
The achievement moves the field of extinct genomes closer to the goal of, quote, de-extinction, bringing vanished species back to life by slipping the genome into the egg of a living species, quote, Jurassic Park-like.
Right.
End quote. De-extinction probably increases with every point in ancient DNA analysis, said Stuart Brand, co-founder of the nonprofit conservation group Revive and Restore, which aims to resurrect vanished species, including the passenger pigeon and the woolly mammoth, whose genomes have already been mostly pieced together. Out of the Atlantic, a biohacker publicly regrets injecting himself with CRISPR. Imagine that. When Josiah Zahner watched a biotech CEO drop his pants at a biohacking conference and inject himself with an untested herpes treatment, he realized things had gone off rails. Zaire is no stranger to stunts in biohacking, loosely defined as experiments, often on self, that takes place outside of traditional, quote, lab spaces. You might say he invented their latest incarnation. He sterilized his body to, quote, transplant his entire microbiome in front of a reporter.
Jesus.
When Zaire saw Ascendance Biomedical CEO injecting himself on a live stream earlier this month, you might say there was an uneasy flicker of recognition. Real Clear Politics let us know shooting survivor from a shooting survivor, quote, CNN gave me scripted questions after denying questions about armed guards. Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School student Colton Hobb said he was approached by CNN to ask a question at Wednesday night's town hall, but decided not to after the network gave him, quote, a scripted question, quashing the one he wrote himself. Hab, a member of the junior ROTC, shielded students while the school was under attack from the shooter. He said he was going to ask about veterans as armed guards for security at the school, and CNN told him, quote, he said, quote, CNN had originally asked me to write a speech and questions, and it ended up being all scripted. CNN has responded saying that was not the case.
Right.
That they said that they wanted him to ask his question in a different way, but he insists on the fact that they gave him a totally different question to ask. Popular Science came out. China's hypersonic aircraft would fly from Beijing to New York in 2 hours. A team of research at the Chinese Academy of Sciences have tested a hypersonic plane in a wind tunnel to speeds of Mach 7, or 5,600 miles per hour, according to a paper published in the Chinese journal Physics, Mechanics, and Astronomy. CNBC, Apple confirms it uses Google's cloud for the iCloud. The collaboration is around storing iCloud users' data. There's no indication Apple is also relying on Google for additional computer work, but Google's cloud websites don't contain references to its business from Apple. A file that Apple updated on its website last month provides first acknowledgement that it's relying on Google's public cloud for data storage for its iCloud services. So whenever you put some stuff on the iCloud, folks, for a service that you're paying for, it's actually going straight onto a free service that is supposedly not as secure as your iCloud, even though your iCloud is technically the Google Cloud. Out of CNBC also today, a smartphone has been designed that cuts off your camera and microphone so no spy agency can watch you. Cybersecurity firm Dark Matter has unveiled its first iPhone. The KTIM is designed to stop spy agencies from listening to you. It's an Android smartphone with a 5.2-inch display and strong encryption. One security feature called, quote, shield mode disconnects power from the microphone and camera on the device. Nobody can spy on your conversations. Finally, this is relating to our guest tonight, Mr. Rusty Lozano, who will get on the line in just a moment. Scientific American, 1 in 17 teens are sexting, says new research. And consensual teen sexting
that might even be a low
cause
number
for concern. The following essay is reprinted with permission from the conversation on a online publication covering the latest research. Sexting is known as the sharing of sexually explicit images and videos through the internet via electronic devices such as smartphones. 1 in 7 teens report they are sending sexts, and 1 in 4 are receiving sexts, according to the study of over 110,000 teens from around the world, published on February 26th in JAMA Pediatrics. Teen-to-teen sexting has generated considerable media attention, with news headlines mostly warning of the dangers of sexting. And in January 2018, police in Chateauguay near Montreal, or Chateauguay rather, pardon my French, literally, Chateauguay, in Montreal, launched a campaign called, quote, Sex Are Porn, targeted at students aged 12 to 17. The UK, one police force recently warned parents that they may be prosecuted if their children send indecent images over mobile phones. Naturally, this has many parents worried. Is consensual teen sexting cause for concern? Right. And that, of course, brings us straight up to connecting with our guest here, Rusty Lozano. Let's go ahead and give him a call via Skypeness.
Let's do that with that fancy system.
Yeah. Let's get him going here. We are dialing him up. All right. We have a ringy. Ringy, dingy.
Well, that's always a good sign.
Yeah, always.
This is Rusty.
Hello, Rusty. Chris Jordan here with the Dudes and Beer podcast. How are you, my friend?
Good, Chris. How are you doing, bud?
Doing great, doing great. Give me just a second. Let me get you turned up here a little bit. Are you hearing us okay?
All good on this end. I started recording my own show and just segue into your show. So
well, hot dog.
Sounds like a good
two
deal.
birds with one stone.
That's it, buddy. How is the show going over there at the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano? Tell us a little bit about it.
The show's going really well. You know, the Therapy Hour it's actually a different kind of show. It has more of a counseling show. You bring up psychological topics, and then professionals from around the community, doctors, psychologists, and then in some cases we do interviews with patients, and we just discuss a psychological topic. I mean, it's anger, borderline personality, depression, headaches, and so we put a clinical spin on it, and then what we do is we provide information to the listeners, like where you can find a resource for help. And then also some tips that you're taking away so that you can actually, learn something about our topic.
Yeah.
But you know what I was just talking about?
Go ahead.
I was just talking about, get this, okay? The AR-15.
Yeah.
And when you look at the AR-15, what do you see? What is it associated to when you look at the way an AR-15 is designed and the way it's morphed?
Combat. That's what most people think whenever they see an AR-15.
Exactly. Combat, war, tactical, big bad gun, big bad awesome, destruction.
Definitely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I was just talking about the round on it, right? The NATO round, it's a 223, it's a 5.56. That's a hunting rifle round.
Yeah.
And it's actually just a few. If you ever looked at a 22 Magnum bullet, it's a long, skinny bullet. It's maybe a cousin to that. It's just a few calibers, just a few sizes bigger in weight, but the circumference is about the same. So it's not like a big knockdown round. It's actually made for distance.
Yeah.
But exactly, the AR-15 is associated with tactical, associated with war, it's associated with, I'm a bad mother.
Yeah.
And I have tactical gear on, and I'm gonna do something bad with this.
Yeah.
I mean, why aren't we seeing these shootings happen with with the 12 gauge rifle or a Glock or something like that? Why is it that we're seeing more emphasis on the AR rifle and the tactical nature of it, and they're calling it an assault rifle, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Which, I mean, it's technically not. Yeah. And I posted that. I know you commented on it whenever I posted that about a week or so ago that, hey, listen, the AR-15, despite its name, AR stands for Armalite. Armalite rifle stands for the name of the model and manufacturer.
Yep.
That's what AR stands for.
Model 15.
The actual definition of an assault rifle is a rifle or pistol. An assault weapon, rather, is a weapon with a selectable rate of fire between semi-automatic, fully automatic, or 3-round burst, or just semi and full, or semi and 3-round, which, as we said, is typically a combat rifle. It's something that you would see in the hands of our U.S. Marines, military, even police departments in some areas of the country for SWAT response, that kind of thing. And in order to get that, you really do have to go through some extreme effort as far as going through federal background checks. There is like a 90-day waiting period, not even a 10-day.
Yeah, not even a 10.
It's a long background check to make sure that you are classified to have a Type 2 firearms permit. And be able to. That's how you can go out and, like, there's a place outside of San Antonio where you can go rent fully automatic rifles and shoot them and stuff like that. That's how places like that exist. They've gone through the permitting to be able to get them, and most of the time they buy old military surplus from other countries, things like that. And this is, of course, one of the issues that I wanted to talk about tonight, because it's probably the biggest issue in the news, everything going on. And just for those who don't know Rusty, Rusty is the founder and head of the Center for Biofeedback and behavioral therapy in Addison, Texas. He is a professional therapist. This is what he does for a living. He works with people with PTSD. He works with people who are labeled by the school system as ADD, ADHD, children with special needs, children with emotional disturbance, things like that. Tell us a little bit about your background with that, Rusty, and what your experience has been and how it's changed you as a person working in this field.
Well, I think a lot of it started with my own curiosity, looking into myself. I ran into this field by accident, because I wasn't really planning. I know I wanted to do psychology, but I didn't want to go into therapy. But, I was a kid that struggled a lot. I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about these kids that are having issues today. And there are a lot of us that are adults now that struggle. In fact, you name at least 5 individuals that you grew up with. 3 out of 5 has probably had gone through something like an anxiety or an anger episode or frustration or even like depression or something, right? But I think that what I found is when I started to really get into the field of psychology, I started learning a lot about myself and like why I did the things that I did. And I gave teachers a hard time in school, and I was always an angry kid when it came to getting in trouble, and I didn't like authority. But what won me over was a teacher that took a chance on me, and she took an opportunity to try to understand who I was. And so then, I discovered that I was a pretty bright kid. In fact, I think you and I had a conversation about this one night.
We had a long conversation about it in an episode.
It was a long conversation.
Yeah, in an episode of Thinking Deeply, which you told me to keep in pocket, and I still have in pocket. I have not released it yet, but I think it's time to after this episode. I think it's time for that to come out this week. It was great.
For sure. Yeah, it really was. But, and here's what I found out about myself is I didn't like I didn't like authority because they didn't like me. They didn't like the way that I was, and they didn't like that I was edgy, and they didn't like that, I didn't know a level playing field, and I didn't show respect. And so I gave it back. But then when I discovered this about myself and somebody kind of pointed me in the right direction, hey, you're doing this wrong. Like, what's wrong, kid? You're smart. You're good at sports. What's wrong? And so it was when somebody took that opportunity with me that was a turning point in my life. And that's what led me into this career. And I now designated my entire life to finding kids like myself that are misunderstood, that have emotional issues, that really I feel like they don't have a voice. I teach them how to develop that voice and how to develop the confidence and find out who they are, and know that, when you are in a little bit of trouble, you can always reach out and get help, and reach out and ask for somebody, and they'll boost you. And that's really that's how this whole place started. And we're doing really well. We see a lot of kids with anxiety. We definitely see our share of anger issues and frustration tolerance and school issues. I actually work out of a school during the day and work with kids on coping skills. And that's primarily what the emphasis of what I do is called coping skills.
Well, and, that's something that I bring up all the time, not just in reference to the shootings going on, but in general, because being the kid I was, being the dorky nerd that was always bringing science toys to class on my own time. Like I brought my inventions that I made to school and got in trouble and got them taken away and all kinds of stuff.
But they were cool.
Well, to me they were. But I was definitely a distraction to myself and others among school, and that was written numerous times on progress reports. And it really does come down to, number one, the teachers that you have, the administration that you have in a school, to spot that stuff. Right. I know when I got into teaching, it was and I think we talked about this in the episode with you and I for Thinking Deeply, Rusty. When I got into teaching, it was very easy for me to key in on the kids that were sullen, the kids that obviously had some kind of issue. Like I could just read it on their face,
right?
You know, like the way they carried themselves.
Right.
All that kind of stuff.
Body language, you can kind of read a person.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because going where we went to school, Rusty, to University of Dallas, whenever we took abnormal psychology, we learned that kind of stuff. You know, we learned body language. We learned posturing. We learned that kind of thing. And then we went out and actively, observed it in classrooms, you know, and observed kids and stuff like that.
Is that part of the teachers' learnings now to do that? Like what you're saying is like what you've learned to kind of almost sometimes, visually kind of be able to read a person, some teachers, a lot of teachers have 20, 30 kids in their class. Yeah. That's a big deal to kind of each one of them kind of get to know intimately or personally to figure it out,
It is. Go ahead, Rusty.
No, I agree.
Okay, yeah. I mean, and the issue is, of course, the fact that you've got 20, 30 kids in a class, and then you have 6 classes a day.
Yeah.
So you do that math, and you're looking between every teacher seeing approximately 120 to 180 kids.
That would be tough for
every single day. Even whenever I taught 4, 5, and 6-year-olds music and religion at a private Catholic school, I saw 100 children a day.
Right.
And is it necessarily the fact that you can key in on everybody? No, not necessarily. No. But the fact is you see them 5 days a week.
Right.
And if socially, I think we as a society have gotten to where we're so closed off from each other, even as neighbors, that we don't take the time to look for that, even amongst our friends. And unfortunately, even amongst our family, frequently we don't take the time to try to empathize. We don't take the time out of our day to look for that moment to empathize with somebody and possibly help someone out.
So, is there some type of sensitivity training, like for teachers?
Oh, sure. I mean, they all take abnormal psychology.
Yeah.
They're all going to take some kind of child psychology class, and these things will come up, whether or not you take it upon yourself to study more than the curriculum of psychology or sociology that is given to you. Because as a teacher going through education, you'll probably have a couple of psychology classes. They aren't anything hugely intensive. They aren't anything crazy. Once you go out and you start doing your practicum and you're sitting in a classroom, that's when you really I guess it kind of starts to impress on you the way that other teachers are teaching. You know, you've got your own concept, but when you see other teachers teaching, hey, if they aren't doing that, you may very well see it as something that isn't necessary.
Yeah.
I remember firmly because, like I said, I was like you, Rusty. I didn't do a lot of my homework, things like that. And I had teachers ask me if everything was all right at home. And it's like, everything's fine. I just don't want to do your homework.
Right.
Yeah. And they, I guess, appreciated my candor and my honesty with them. And, they were always kind of ticked that the best that they could give me was a B. Because I didn't do my homework. Right. Classes like science and everything, I did my homework just before I went into class. Like, I didn't even need to use my book. I knew most of it. But there were many classes where, I did have issues. And there were many classes where, I was picked on by some people. But I did have teachers that noticed that, took me aside, talked to me. And that's whenever I went to be a teacher, those were the teachers that, I went and thanked for taking the time to be a part of my life outside of the classroom, for taking the active interest, like Tim Driscoll, my theater teacher. He definitely saw that in me and saw the fact that I was more apt to be a technician than I was to be on stage, as much as I wanted to be on stage. And he guided me that way. And it's hard, yes, Stephen, to give that individual attention to a student.
Right.
But if something's awry, dude, if you notice something's not right, I think that's kind of what I even saw a post about this guy that he really just had a bitch out getting onto these kids saying, hey, my kid's safety is not worth you just saying, oh my God, I don't want to talk to that person. And he goes, man up. If you see something wrong, you say something. Be diligent about it. And I'm not necessarily sure that it's necessarily a child's responsibility. I mean, yeah, if they see something weird, this person's acting weird, yes. But I think more importantly, it should be like the teachers and like the school system should maybe calculate and estimate what might be going on in this child's life and assess the danger. And I think that's something that we need to get back to.
Absolutely. And I mean, God bless teachers. God bless every one of them. They, along with police and firemen and EMTs, have some of the most dangerous jobs in the country and some of the lowest pay. When it comes to this stuff, like my mother, for crying out loud, like with a walker in the hallway was hit by a student. Like here's a woman who's like 2 years away from retiring. She's 63 and a student decides to haul off and pop her. Like
I had an aunt that was a sub and she was like 50 something, and she got popped, from behind.
Well, and that's what we have to ask, like in the last few years, Rusty, there have been so many stories. The Deckham game that was going on, the knockout game that was happening all over the country where it was literally where kids thought that it was fun just to go up to a random person like waiting at the bus stop and run up behind them and pop them in the back of the head and knock them out.
Oh, God.
And then run off.
Oh, geez.
And it was happening all over the country,
man.
Like kids taking cell phone videos of themselves doing it and stuff like that. Those are the issues that I want to talk about. What is it that leads to that kind of behavior? What is it that can take a kid down that road? What can we do to see that kind of stuff? What can we do, like... you're friends with Julie Collin. Julie is not here this evening. Welcome back from vacation, by the way, Julie.
Welcome back from vacation. And you point to her chair.
She actually had an
I want to hear the story. I heard you guys had a weird she posted something about it being a weird cruise. Something like that.
Yeah, they had some kind of weird time. I don't know. I haven't.
Those posts were kind of weird. I was like, "What's going on that ship?"
I haven't gotten all the details. I don't think they were privy to like a throwdown on the Carnival cruise.
I know, right? But 19 people piled up.
But even that, man, good God, think about that. Like that was a family that was there on the cruise on family reunion.
Right.
Somebody in their family thought it was a great idea for us to go on a week-long cruise together as a family.
Right.
And that was a family that caused that.
Right. It takes one little
they're
spark.
Probably thinking, we're gonna hash this out because nobody can escape.
Yeah.
So that was probably what was on their mind.
Yeah.
And you can't get off. You can't bail this time.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's intervention gone to another level.
You get like half your family doing it, and then just like I was saying at one time recently, Chris, about like the majority's doing it. Okay, I'm gonna join in.
Well, and that's just it. How much of it? Because there was an instance just here in Austin. Julie posted about it. Where at Aikens High School, a kid apparently brought a few clips of ammunition and some smoke grenades.
Yeah, I saw that.
To school.
Oh, God.
Was showing them to kids, and I guess in hopes that he wouldn't be told on. And like I told Amy, even whenever I posted it.
Actually, he got on the school bus, made it to the school, and he was ranting and using curse words and stuff and all kinds of, he was kind of irate, Yeah.
And,
hey, well, listen to this. I have a theory, and I want you guys to tell me what you think, okay?
Give it to us. Give us your hypothesis.
Here's what I think. I think that what's happened is, let's go back to the way that the brain works. Okay, the brain has never been outside of the cranium. And this is my spill. This is the way I always introduce what I'm about to do.
Beautiful.
It can't tell a difference. I mean, it has sensors to detect the outside world. It has sensors to see, so you have eyeballs. And they're not even that perfect because, some of us need corrected vision. So it goes to say how important are eyes, how important is sight in the way that we're supposed to be existing in this world, right? And then we have sensors in the body to detect temperature, sensors that tell you when you need to use the restroom, when you're hungry, tired, thirsty. when your clothes are too tight, when you need another beer. So there are sensors that tell you everything about what's going on in the world. You reach out, you touch a table, there's a sensory response that you're getting from that interaction. And so that then relays back to the brain, and it combines sight and sensation, and it combines and it makes a perception. It makes actually an experience. This is a brown table that I'm sitting at in my studio, and it feels this way. I'm reaching for this object, and I now have it, and it's proximal distal. And so that's the way the brain works, and we learn. Okay, so when you step outside in the world, you see what's around you, and you can detect right away if it's cold or if it's hot. Don't need a coat, don't need to wear shorts. Some of us rely on the app to tell us what the weather is, and then you make the adjustment according to that. That's the real world, right? The sensate. You're touching, you're seeing, you're processing what you're seeing.
Absolutely.
The brain can't tell a difference. It can't tell a difference between what it sees and the sensate, the immediate actual world, and then the virtual world. Now, let's fast forward to society and kids in this generation now. What's happening? Well, you're seeing countless amounts of time spent on social media. You're seeing countless amount of time spent on a phone, in front of a computer, engaging on an iPad. There's no longer real dialogue, but a lot, even learning, is all virtual. And I call that virtual because your brain sees that, it processes information, and then you produce a response, right? So is there a connection there between how these kids are actually having like a lack of empathy, a lack of compassion? Somebody going and saying, "Get ready, this next town, I'm ready to shoot you up," and then posting something like that, knowing that people lost their lives. Are they even processing what they're seeing as real, or is it that their brain is so stuck on this virtual mode that they're not making the connection of like, hey, this really actually freaking happened, dude.
Yeah.
People actually died, and they're actually hurting families. And then you go and you say something like that, and are we missing something here? You see what I'm saying?
Oh no, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And we talk about that all the time on this show. It's the fact of it causes, and I can attest to it because I was a horror movie fanatic when I was a kid. Even though I had an overactive imagination and I was easily scared, I loved the special effects of horror movies.
Me too.
That's what got me into theater.
George Romero.
That's what got me into theater. That's what got me into what I'm doing, was wanting to do special effects makeup. And I loved gory horror movies.
Lucci.
Lucio Fulci, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And just even Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. Like, I watched them ad nauseum as though I was studying a style and a form to do something. And I can definitely say that it didn't change me. It didn't make me someone that would want to go out to a sleepover camp with a bunch of different implements of death and start doling things out near the lake at night. But it definitely desensitized me to violence. And to seeing violence. And my prime example that I always gave to kids whenever I taught them was coming home from work one day. I had seen somebody who had jumped off a bridge, and he was covered up by a sheet on the side of the road. And my immediate concern was traffic. My immediate concern, whenever I saw it, I was like, oh, at least there's a reason for the traffic. And I was like, dude, how cold and insensitive is that?
Right.
And it really was a pivotal point in my life where it was like, whoa, wait a minute. I need to pump the brakes somewhere here, because my concept, my concept is a little bit out of whack right now. From that point on, whenever I get into heavy traffic like that, it's like, hey, good God, please don't let somebody be hurt up there. Let it just be a bunch of idiots that don't know how to merge. Please God, don't let somebody be hurt.
The value of a real life.
Because that day, my whole thought process the whole time was, come on, people, what? Can't you drive? There was a dead person up there.
Right.
And how often do we in this society, like I said, take the moment, just like those teachers, how often do we take the moment to empathize, to try and feel beyond our own brain box, Rusty? You know what I mean? To reach out to our fellow human, to see somebody in need. Like you said, see something, say something, man. If you see a kid getting bullied in school, freaking stand up, dude. Stand up.
Let's go back to something like, you remember when Logan Paul had the YouTube video that was highly criticized?
Yes.
He was the guy who's a famous YouTuber,
Yep.
and they were filming in China or Japan or somewhere. And
it was in
and then they
Japan
went
at the
into
suicide forest.
Oh, that one.
Suicide forest, and then they found a dead body.
Yeah.
And he was
Okay.
kind of snickering and stuff, and they were kind of snickering about it. I mean, lack of compassion, dude. I mean, you see something that's real,
Right.
it's right in front of you, but then, like, what does he resort to? You know, instead of seeking out dialogue, they resort to getting right back on the social media and filming all of this. I mean, you know, and then filming their reaction. It's like, you know, everybody wants to be, it's like these kids are finding a way of expressing themselves.
Right.
Like their only reality is the fact that, you know, do they have likes and are people watching, and is that my, you know, how am I valued? In that regard?
Well, and that's just it. That's where we're placing the value is how many views are you getting? How viral did your video go? You know,
this whole conversation brings it more concerning to me, because now, you know, it makes perfect sense that people are, you know, drawn to social media and they're stuck in this virtual reality. And then even when they're off of it, I don't think they're back to reality. They're still stuck in that.
They can't. They're so accustomed to it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you see it on the dinner table. That's
Right.
why you see it. You know, I was at a stoplight, and you know, I had my phone, and I was checking my stuff, but, you know, I'm driving my car, right?
Sure.
And so, and I drive this truck, and it's suspended and it's high.
It's a big old truck, dude. It is a proper Texas truck, folks.
Big ass truck.
It's a big boy, man.
He got the ranch truck for hog hunting, is what he got.
So this dart bus pulls up next to me, and there's I think there's maybe about 10 people on it, and dude, all of them are on their phones. Like nobody's dialing.
Yeah.
And there was one person that I think must have been like maybe they didn't have a phone. And I remember they were wearing a red hoodie, and they were like looking left to right and up and down, looking around the bus, and they didn't have a phone, and like that's all they could do is just look around, look right and left and up and down. And you could tell it's like that was the only one that didn't have a phone system that they were actually checking into.
Yeah.
So there's a problem here, and I think that the problem is that, you know, this brings everybody, China, Sydney, Australia, it brings everybody together closely in the palm of your hand. It's powerful. And then whenever you don't have it, you run out of batteries. You look around and the world is still, and it's uninteresting and it's boring. Mm-hmm. So are these kids getting caught up when they're in the formative years of their life, instead of learning skills like social skills, courting a girl, making friendships, learning how to tell jokes, and carrying on a conversation, sharing music interests, right? They're not.
Just so people know, like the developmental stages of life. I wish Julie was here because she's got a high school student. You yourself have a couple of junior high students.
I have a high schooler.
Yeah, high school.
I have a sophomore in high school.
Yeah, and who actually just came and ran here in Austin, correct?
Yeah, we were actually. Well, that was my wife. But we were all in Austin, and the girls went. Oh, and so you saw my post about the girls canoeing, and you know, over at Zilker Park. And you know what somebody had said that sparked all of this curiosity with me is she says that looks, you know, so simple, beautiful. It is so simple, it's real. And that haunted me, dude, because I was like, that is real, dude. Yeah. They're in this boat. You know, they have to paddle, and there is elements around them. There's water, there's trees, they have to navigate. It's real. Yeah. And what we're missing, and I think that what's happening with these kids, is they're not getting enough of that.
Yeah.
You know, they're not getting enough of it because they go to school and then they run the little gamut and they listen to lectures and they see each other in the hallways. And then some of them play sports, and some of them, you know, I can't talk to the general populace, but, you know, some are actively social.
Yeah.
But a majority of them, they come back home, do homework, and they're on the video games or they're on the Snapchats, and
well,
it's a perpetual cycle.
It's not only that. I mean, also, and believe me, ladies, I am not here to disempower anybody. Good God, believe me, I wish I was a stay-at-home dad. You know, like if my wife's career with acting took off suddenly, like, hey, I would take the kid to karate in school and make lunches in a heartbeat.
You could be Mr. Mom, dude.
But I am a huge believer of when it's positive. And, Amy still teaches classes. Amy still has shows. Amy still does that. But she's really, and I'm so proud of her, to have, within the last year, really defined herself as mother. And she still writes, she still does her stuff when the baby's asleep, when the baby's gone, all kinds of stuff. She still does her podcast with Yes, But Why. Mm-hmm. But she has made Dalbus, our son, the going concern in her life. And I am like, baby, I will do anything possible to facilitate that. Because growing up as a latchkey kid, and I love you, Mom. It was nothing of your doing. Good God, you were improving your life. You were doing the best that you could possibly do with two boys, one of which was just as rambunctious as possible in the dark of night.
The dark of night.
But,
oh, God.
like, it really does start. And I saw it so frequently with 4, 5, and 6-year-olds who would come to kindergarten. And this was a Catholic school kindergarten.
What'd they do?
Oh, no, it was kids that showed up to kindergarten that didn't know ABCs.
What?
And there's no reason whatsoever why your child should be 4 or 5 years old and not know ABCs.
Yes.
The only reason that happens is because mom or dad is not actively involved on a daily basis.
Right.
And it's a sad fact of our society. It's a horrible fact of our society that single parents are hugely on the rise. Young single parents are the largest rising demographic of parents that are out there. People in their early mid-20s raising kids by themselves. And at that point, good God, I didn't have life figured out till I was 30.
Right.
Like
it's hard to figure it out. And now they're having these kids try to figure out what they want to do with their life in high school.
Oh, yeah.
I just think that the disconnect between what's real, reality.
I use myself as a prime example with that. We both met at University of Dallas, Rusty. Had I never gone to the seminary to explore being a Catholic priest, I would have never, ever even heard of University of Dallas because, number one, my grades were nowhere near what was required to get into University of Dallas, nor were my SAT scores. The only reason I got in was because I was a seminarian, and I was right on the cusp, so they let me in. Other than that, I'd have never gotten a letter. I'd have never heard anything about them. And it was a truly life-changing and life-forming experience going there. I met my wife there. So much did I love it that when I left UD, after utterly failing out during my Rome semester, I spent a year at home, then came back. And that's when I met Amy. That's when I met Julie, Rusty, everybody.
Wow, that's badass.
But even then, it was one of those... the lessons of my childhood, the lessons that I had growing up by myself did not really behoove me so much because I didn't have the discipline. I didn't have somebody there, not necessarily to lord over me, but to talk to me about things. I didn't have somebody to, like, when I came home from school, my brother went to work and I sat around and played Sega, until like 30 minutes before my mom came home. Then I did the dishes and vacuumed. So she wouldn't yell.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes, most of the times, I kept playing Sega until I heard the gate, and then it was like, oh shit, I'm gonna get yelled at.
We know how that goes.
But it is. There are those formative times that we learned in developmental psychology, man, where and junior high and high school are when you really start forming your own identity. And B, making your own decisions in the world and learning those repercussions.
Right.
And that only comes through actual social interaction. And that's where I wanted to come back to what Rusty was talking about with the digital disconnect that's going on with our society right now. Because, good God, we have adults that don't even think before they put things out on Twitter, think before they put things out on Facebook. Like, there's people getting fired left and right from executive jobs because of shit that they put out on Facebook in college.
Right.
You know? Like, without that, or rather with that digital disconnect, how do we, because like I said, to me, that socialization begins at home. It begins with the concepts of that is acceptable, that is not acceptable. That's acceptable at home, but when we lock the front door and go to school, it's not. You know what I mean? Like, when is it a good idea for you as a behavioral psychologist? When is the best time for people to start setting those boundaries for their children and start kind of instilling those concepts of, when you go to school, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. When you go outside of these doors, this is acceptable, this is not.
I don't think there's ever really a limit when it's the right time to do it. Some people that are on top of their game, do it. You start setting those limits and raise their child that way. But you know what I was thinking about the other day is, that's no good either, because that means if you're there, the child consistently has what they need, and they consistently, you consistently provide it. It's nurturing, safe environment. Is that like maybe more of a nonverbal helicoptering?
Yes.
And then you also can't parent with fear. I think that what we need to do is, it has to be a beautiful balance between figure it out and then be there to give support and swoop in and give them some objectives. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no.
But the white picket fence and the stay-at-home mom who's there all day long, I mean, that's great. I mean,
or even stay-at-home dad. Let's just don't make it moms, because like I said, that's my dream, dude. That's my dream. I want to make my money off nothing but podcasts and just be at home all day.
Be Michael Keaton.
There it is. Be the Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is, I think it's a balance between, it's a beautiful balance. It has to be a balance between figure it out and help them out. Because the only way that a lot of these kids will learn is by making mistakes.
Yeah,
and you can always recover from a mistake.
Well,
you can recover from a mistake. You can say I'm sorry days after. You can make an effort to make it better, even though it's already been done.
Sure.
But you have to experience a mistake, experience failure. You have to know that things, just because you fail doesn't mean that you have to go off the deep end and do something extreme and like your life is over and feel like, well, I'm going down. I'm going to take everybody down with me. What I think the message that we're missing here is that when you make a mistake, there's a lesson that is learned from that, and you become stronger. Yeah. You become leathered, and that's what makes us tough and resilient. Resilient. I think resiliency is actually, it's a dying breed here, dude.
Absolutely.
If you don't learn from it, then that's something to be concerned about.
I literally almost fell on my knees crying and thanking God when my child came out with red hair. Because of the fact, number one, we're a dying breed. There are not many of us left, and the genome will be gone within the next 50 to 100 years. So I'm glad to pass that on and keep it going. By that point, we may be burned at the stake as witches again, the way society's going. Who knows?
Oh, geez.
But it's also one of those, like, my being a redhead, like I said in the week in the news, in the first week in the news, where I was talking about self-deprecating humor makes, a new study has found that self-deprecating humor makes people more well-balanced as people and have a deeper understanding of themselves. And my grandfather used to make fun of my big feet and my red hair all the time.
Right.
And he knew people picked on me about it. I was like, good God, I didn't weigh over 100 pounds till I was a freshman in college. So there I was, a 6-foot tall dude with size 15 feet that didn't weigh over 100 pounds. Like, there's a little bit to be made fun of. And
hey, but you remember, just to interject something.
Go ahead.
You remember that movie Gran Torino?
Yeah.
You remember when they took
Get
that
off
little
my
neighbor
lawn.
kid into the barber shop? They took that little kid into the barber shop, and then they started busting his chops, and they were trying to teach him that that's
That's
an
life.
acceptable thing, and
That's life,
and
bro.
that's like, you don't have to take it seriously. That's just the way that we
don't
talk to
take
each
it
other.
seriously.
That's
Exactly.
it. That's it.
Yeah.
It's something that it's definitely one of those memes of society amongst men. Like, and just so you ladies know, like I had a friend of mine, also from UD, ask not too long ago on Facebook about kids, about young men actively tagging each other, nut checking. And she was like, what is this? Like, how come I never knew about this? Like, I'm a woman in my 40s who, like, saw men my whole life, and I don't know if I ever saw this. And I'm like, oh no, it's a thing. Like, don't worry about it. It's a perfectly natural thing, and it's how we test our survival instinct. It's like, hey, are you paying attention to the periphery? Because I'm coming at you right now.
Yeah. Right.
And it's that old warrior concept. It's that old concept of always being ready.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how we train each other, and it's how we razz each other. It's what guys do.
I never steal a horse from a man I didn't like.
Exactly. Way to say it, Billy the Kid. And it's like, even at work where I just was with 7 guys tearing down a room, we're giving each other shit while we do it. Yeah. Like, hey, dude, if you could tear that down a little bit faster, that'd be great. And it's like, I can only do it so safely, you asshead. It's what we do as guys. So it is one of those, like, we learn these social cues early in life. And unfortunately, if you haven't dealt with bullies to begin with, on your way to school or at school, it can be tough when you step into the digital realm thinking it's your private space.
Oh, yeah.
When a bully comes in. And how do you deal with that? How do you, and like you said earlier, I'd like to get back to the concept of coping mechanisms, because that's something that I always tried to, whenever I found troubled students, students with anger issues, students who obviously went off on other students, that I would try to teach them some coping skills. And how to deal with that, and how to just be like, hey, let them say what they want. Right. Like, it's just words, man. Right. It's just words. Right. What are some, because, quite obviously, you being a behavioral therapist, Rusty, at the Center for Biofeedback and Behavioral Therapy there in Addison, what are some of the concepts that y'all use there at the center to teach coping skills, not only to children, but to adolescents as well?
Well, the emphasis that we have is mostly on body techniques and body systems. The theory here is that an emotional reaction, an emotion in general, is a combination of, if we dissect what an emotion is, it's a physiological response that results in a physical reaction, which then is either perpetuated by a thought, by a belief, or a reaction of some sort that is cognitive. So what we do is we dissect that process, and we look at how an emotional response, an emotional reaction occur. And that is that we look at the body's physiological mechanism, that stress mechanism, stress response. This is what makes people blurt out in anger. This is what makes people have panic attacks and feel as if they're anxious and have headaches and have an array of negative emotional states.
People like me who, while they're at work, just suddenly start sweating while they're sitting down.
All physiological.
Yeah.
So what we do is there are 2 mechanisms in the brain. There's the body's sympathetic network, and that is the fight or flight response that we're all familiar with. You've heard of the superhuman strength, people lifting up cars off of babies, peeling back a door off of a burning car, peeling back the door frame to pull people out on the inside. So superhuman strength that is all physiologically driven. So what we do is that sympathetic network. We know how it happens. We know what happens in the body. Heart rate escalates, breathing gets rapid, skin begins to sweat, pupils dilate, heart rate escalates, blood pulls back from the extremities, and like you metamorphosize into an instinctual survival response. So what happens is when you do this over and over again, you get stuck that way. And now we're dealing with a conditioned response.
Yes.
So that conditioned response then is what the issue is that when an individual child continues to tap into this response over and over and over again, well, they're having a reaction to it, and they can't shut it off. So what we do is we show them how to use relaxation strategies as a coping mechanism.
Okay.
And so breathing techniques, body techniques, to help them learn how to manage what they're feeling and feel differently. You know, I just got through having a session with, it was my last appointment of the night, but it was a mom and a dad and their 2 kids. And we have these machines that measure this physiology through heart rate variability. And there are 3 different tones. One is a quiet tone, and then a little dot that's red lights up. You have these 3 histogram bars that have scores on them. Blue is a medium relaxed response, and it usually is followed by a low bong or a rubber band kind of sound. And then there's a high chime sound, which is a ching, and that lets you know that they're in the highest state of relaxation. And so what we do is we teach them skills and techniques that are hooked up to this machine, and we're seeing how the body is responding according to how this machine is actually on the computer is registering the responses. And so we teach them techniques to actually produce the blues and the greens. And so anyways, I had this family tonight that was a mom and dad and a little daughter and their son. And I have 3 rotations. We have clinical rotation, which is where I teach, parent rotation, which is where they teach, practicum is where we go and practice the technique in a gym. Well, what I've done is actually put the child in charge of teaching the parent. So they had learned very specific breathing. Yeah, very specific breathing techniques. And so I left the room. And when I came back, about 5 minutes later, both parents, their machines are chiming green. And so she was actually walking them through the breathing technique that they learned over and over again, and they're producing the positive responses. That's how we teach coping mechanisms, how to calm your body down. Why? Because that's where all of the reactions come from. You can reason with somebody emotionally, but guess what that does? That's just as equivalent to telling somebody who lost a dog or had to put a dog down and say, it's okay, you'll get another dog.
Yeah, you'll be all right. It'll pass.
Yeah. And does it make it any better for them? Absolutely not. So the equivalent, using talk therapy and talking to people when they're in this state, it doesn't gel. It doesn't work well because it's like using oil and water to communicate.
Well, yeah.
So
Go ahead.
Oh, well, what speaks volumes, though, is teaching them how to actually change the physical state in the body. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to say, because I myself is someone who suffers from social anxiety, and it didn't settle in for me until, or at least I didn't realize it until way later in life. When I started working in clubs, and specifically when I started going out to clubs when I wasn't working, that's when I noticed it. And even now I have an issue with it. And it's because when I'm working, my blinders are on.
Right.
Like, I'm in my zone. My focus is between me and the stage and what's going on.
Right.
Everything else is mute.
Right.
Like, I don't hear the crowd.
Right.
I don't, I feel the energy between the stage and the musicians and myself.
Right.
And, that's where I'm focused. And that's my coping mechanism. When I go out to just a club with a band playing, it is one of the most sensory overload experiences I can have.
Yeah.
And
it
takes so much for me to tune that out.
Right.
Like, even for me to go to the mall or to Walmart, like, it's typically a mission.
Yeah.
Like, it's a mission trip.
You've passed out before.
I'm not going to Walmart to, like, walk around for an hour and check things out. I am going in to buy something and get out.
Right.
Because the longer I'm in that situation, like I start hearing conversations 20, 30 feet away from me.
Yeah.
I start hearing footsteps that then start taking on rhythmic patterns, and it just becomes a sensory overload. And yeah, like you said, 6 months before my wedding was when I was diagnosed with anxiety because I plumb passed out in Walmart picking out tomatoes, man.
Jeez,
picking out cans of tomatoes, like trying to decide between like stewed or petite diced.
Dude, clean up aisle 7.
And I woke up in the manager's office with a couple of EMTs and the dude that saw me pass out. And I saw the footage. And there I was, looking at cans, and I dropped like a sack of potatoes, man, in the middle of the aisle. Just boom, fell. Never experienced that in my life.
Wow.
Never thought that I had anxiety, anything like that.
What?
You know, I was like, hey, I'm not taking a ride in your ambulance. You know, I don't taste pennies. I remember why I was here. I can give you the ABCs backwards. Well, tasting pennies or copper or metal in your mouth is a sign that, like, you may have had a heart attack. Like, you have elevated electrolytes right now. You know.
And Nixon wasn't president, right?
Like, I know what day it is.
Was it Ronald Reagan either?
I know why I was here. I know what my plans are tomorrow. Part of them is me going to the doctor, but I'm not going to hop in the EMT ride right now. And I went to the doctor, and we did some physiological stuff to make sure that there wasn't any kind of murmur or make sure I didn't have an infarction there on site. And after that, they put me on anxiety meds, which I'm still on. And they also put me into 6 months of talk therapy with Joe. And Joe was great. I loved going and seeing Joe. And what Joe taught me specifically was some coping mechanisms. And he was like, from what I'm understanding, the issue that you're having is that things happen. You're in a situation that would normally be high stress to begin with. And things happen that add to that stress, and you don't see a means by which to get rid of that, which adds more stress to you.
Right.
He was like, what I would like you to do is to start seeing these situations as a train. Start seeing them as like you've pulled up to the tracks and there's a train going by.
Okay.
There is absolutely nothing you can do about this train going by.
Okay.
You could try to go through the train if you want. Feel free.
That's how you end up on the floor.
That's your free choice, but it's probably not going to end up well, right?
Yeah, right.
So let the train pass. Enjoy watching the train. Acknowledge the fact that there's a train there and it's passing you.
Right.
And remember the fact that that train is going to pass.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
That whatever that train is that just came in and blocked your passage, there is an end to that train.
There's an end to this.
See, because I would get into like swirling circles of thought that led me back to the same place, and circular thought patterns that just led me into horrible, bad places of thinking. And the day he gave me that coping mechanism of think of it as a train. It's an inconvenience right now, yes, but this is going to pass.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that concept is called decentering.
Yeah.
And so that it's not such a focal point in your mind. You don't obsess about it over and over again. You can kind of like, untrain your mind to disengage it so that you can just wait for the end, wait for it to pass. Just like a rainy day.
Yeah, and that's just it, and it's done worlds for me since then. It doesn't mean that I do not need to be on maintenance medication to avoid that situation happening. Now,
did it work the very first time you tried that? It seems harder than what it sounds.
Well, I mean, granted, I'm a little bit more fortunate than most in the fact that I had a steady prayer life for a long time. I had a steady life of meditation for a long time. And that was one of the things that I came to him with, was the fact that I could no longer find quiet in my life. I could no longer, it used to be that I could meditate for 30 minutes on end.
Right.
And it was great.
Yeah.
I could just be still and listen.
Yeah.
But it had gotten to the point that the white noise in my head was so loud, with things going on, things that I wanted to do, things that I was trying to do, things that I was trying to enact.
I can relate.
That I couldn't shut off.
Right.
And I was just perfectly overstimulated. And always overstimulated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've now taken the time to say, like, no, I just got off the road for 26 days. I'm not taking the next phone call that comes.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm going to give myself 3 days of decompression.
Yeah.
Where I do nothing but sit on the couch and maybe take care of my invoice and watch TV and watch Ancient Aliens or do something that I just thoroughly enjoy.
That's right.
And reward myself for that work and de-stress and decompress for a little while so that when things come back about, I'm fresh and I'm renewed.
Yep.
And like you were saying, Rusty, it's hard to get to the point of deprogramming that salient biological response of survival that happens with us, because these issues are so rooted in the situations of survival that our brain works in. Our brain is wired to learn from bad experience more than it learns from good experience. You know, and it's hard to break that cycle and to make your brain learn from more good than it does bad. And understand.
Well, it's a lot easier when it's done. You know, I know that I've gotten in a fight before and I've lost, and you know, the first couple of days back, it's kind of embarrassing. You know, it's all between your legs, but then, like, you know, whatever, you move on. But I think that the pitfall that we see a lot of kids fall into now is that there's a permanence to stuff that's posted on the internet.
Yes.
And it haunts them. And this is what's leading to a lot of these suicides of kids, is that it's out there and it's floating around. And you know, I remember that there was one family that I was working with, and the girl was lovely, sweet high school girl. She's a body lifter and, you know, cute kid, but somebody had said something about her face and called her a butterface or something like that, you know.
Sure.
And said some really awful things. And she told me about it, and I was like, well, let's see what we can do to get it off. And so I called my brother-in-law, who's, you know, a computer specialist, and he said it was going to cost about, you know, $10,000 to get it off the internet.
Yeah, to scrub it.
There's no way to do it, you know. So when it's out there, it's out there. So if it's a rumor or a mistake, and how often are kids going to make mistakes? Pretty dang often, right? And so if it's out there floating around, it's like it takes a lot more time for that to disappear than it would have been if I had an encounter with a fight in my era, you know?
Yeah.
So there are just a lot more hangups that these kids can fall into.
Well, and that is absolutely a new pothole in humanity and life that we have, is the fact that, I mean, sure, whenever we were in high school, Rusty, something happened that lasted for a month or two, and maybe if it was something crazy, you know, there was an indelible mark or a nickname that was picked up along the way, something like that.
Right.
But in the digital day and age, and especially with online bullying and things like that that you're talking about, it is a lot harder to get rid of it, because that's there. Like, that stuff pops up in Google search, you know?
I see in the near future that something's going to be done with that $10,000 removing stuff. I mean, stuff like that needs to be removed, like, immediately, you know, like once assessed, you know, like, but, okay, this is validated. Let's
But hey,
this.
there's a multi-billion-dollar business right there. Be the company that does that stuff and knows how to. You know?
Like get rid of this shit.
Yep, exactly. Just pay your premium, and they'll knock it out for you.
Yeah, kind of a LifeLock type situation.
Right.
I see something like that in the future.
Now, with all this in mind, Rusty, you know, I've seen it growing for a while, not just with kids that I taught for 10 years, but with kids in my family, friends, children, stuff like that, just online presence starts earlier and earlier, it seems like. And one of the articles that we read tonight was about teen sexting becoming a huge problem, becoming a huge issue.
I don't know if it's becoming. I think it has been.
Well, I think it's definitely on the rise more than what it was. And, it's definitely because there's mobile devices available, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But
double-edged sword of technology.
Well, I mean, I guess
what's being made for good could also be made for evil.
Well, true.
It's how you use it.
True, it is how you use it. But what I'm trying to get to is the fact that, much like I don't think adolescents have a grasp on the permanence of what they write on the internet,
long-term effect,
the permanence, the fact that like Rusty just said, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
Unless you got tens of thousands of dollars to scrub a server somewhere.
Right.
And to pay somebody to go in and do it.
Yeah. And even then, they probably might still find something.
It's hard, but it's also something that our society moving the way it moves and being online, sexuality has just been sold in a totally different package.
Yeah.
Over the last decade.
Right.
And I used to teach sex and sexuality to seventh graders, things like that, to give them a base.
Right. I don't think we were even able to perceive the whole big picture before the technology of this came out. I mean, technology came out, boom.
Oh, well,
it was there.
I mean,
whether we liked it or not.
Technology and SMS technology, if you remember, when cell phones first came out, very few phones could do SMS. Yeah. I literally just worked a conference the other day with the people who came up with the concept of SMS texting. And they were like, we had no idea.
Right. They didn't even think of it.
We had no idea that this would be, because Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all these things work off of SMS technology.
Wow.
All these things work off the same technology as texting and stuff like that. So it was interesting to hear them talk about the growth of these platforms after they came out with the idea of sending an instant message to somebody or to a group of people. And as a society, we have definitely, I mean, good God, the 50 Shades movies are all over the place. We've definitely,
sounds interesting.
We've definitely put sex and sexuality in and of itself in the front window of the store.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And when do you think, as a behavioral therapist, Rusty, because I know everybody's different, every kid is different, but when is it typically that these things start to become relevant to kids in general? And when is it that parents should really start talking to their kids about these type of things, talking to them about an online presence, talking to them about issues on Facebook, looking for creepers on Facebook, that kind of stuff, as well as how they interact socially via distance with their friends and boyfriends, girlfriends?
Well, I think that, if your child is online in any way, a parent should have a talk with their child about, sexting and being careful what they say, and having really a filter and knowing, the long-term effect of what could happen. So if they're old enough to use and understand what the internet is, you want them to have street smarts. Yeah. I'm going to tell you two stories.
Please.
One is my kid he's friends with a kiddo named Nike. I mean, who the hell calls their kid Nike? On Xbox. Sorry. And I'm like, where's Nike from? And he goes, I don't know. I go, so do you know him? And he's like, how'd you meet him? I met him through gaming. And I was like, his name is Nike. And so, all right, so
smells fun.
You're not gonna go and like meet him somewhere and like, go. He goes, I know, Dad, I'm not dumb. And so, if they have a presence online, if it's online, dude, and then you need to have a talk with your kid. You can't just think, oh, my child is innocent. Because
or at least let them know that Nike, aside from a shoe brand, is also the goddess of victory.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So maybe just like some wonder nerd, on the other side that's like in his 50s.
Thought it was just a stinky shoe.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing that happened is, these kids they know about sexuality. They know what's going on.
Oh, we knew about sexuality, man.
At
least a version of it.
I was blown out of the water because my son was playing Xbox with this group of friends, and I know these little group of kids, and he's like, and then the daughter wanted to play. Haley's like, I want to play. He goes, on my account, and she's like, yeah, I want to try it. And Haley's in high school, and so I got on. I was the one who was going to play because I know how to play. They were playing. What was it? What is that game called? It's Master Chief.
Gears of War, or no,
Halo. Gears of War.
Halo.
Halo.
Yeah, what's that shoot 'em up game?
Like, here, tell me your sister's going to play, and I was going to play, and I was going to like smother those kids, right? And he goes, okay, and like I got on, put his headset on. And these kids are like, okay, yeah, but tell her, she can only play, but tell her she's playing with the Big Dick Club. Oh. And I was like, I looked at him, I was like, what? And I was like, dude. And Harrison said, my son is like, hey, my whole family's in here, man. My aunt, my uncle, my dad, my mom, they all heard that. And then one by one, they all go click, click, click. And they all got offline.
They all got offline.
Yeah, they all got offline.
I guess you won.
But here's the thing, if your child is old enough to play, they're being exposed to things.
Right.
Yeah.
So you want to be the credible resource for your kid. You want to be the one that they learn that from, and not that you have to go and like tell them what that stuff means, but you want to go and give them some instinct training, some street smarts to say, hey, this is right, this is wrong. If you hear this is what you need to do. Get off.
Yeah.
Get off the internet. Don't talk to these people. Don't give them personal information. Right. And then let them go. You're not going to protect them from that anyways.
It almost seems like these conversations. Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead, Rusty. Oh, go ahead, Rusty. You're good. Oh, I was going to say it seems almost like these conversations with the parent and the child these days is got to be more awkward than it was back in the day. Like, oh, the birds and the bees, and it wasn't the stork, I mean, there's so much that they're exposed to that, like you're saying, that you have to be the one first to break it down for them so they won't, you want to be that first one.
And you know what, man? 9 times out of 10, those kids already know.
Yeah.
They already know. And so you can ask them. I mean, I think as a parent, you should ask your kid, hey, so what do you know about the Paris attacks? Or what do you know about, what do you know about sex and girls?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then there's nothing. Or, say, why are you asking? And I was like, well, because I think we need to talk about it. And just make it a conversation. So who cares? So what?
Well, that's it. Well, and that's
you want to be the one. Yeah, you want to be the one to be the source, because
that's right.
If you're the point of reference, then everything else they hear is going to have to compare to what you told them.
That's right.
And they've already heard it from you.
Yeah.
So they're like, that didn't sound right,
Yeah.
So if you kind of bridge the gap and you give them enough, I mean, and not that you have to dictate and hover over their life.
No.
You give them enough information for them to go out and explore and experience that, because they have to.
And it's kind of like leaving the door open too. Like let them kind of know, like, oh, okay, they probably already know this, right? Like you're saying. And so it's kind of like, then you kind of, you already know about it. Okay, cool. Well, I'm just letting you know, but if you have any questions, you can always come to me.
Or if this thing ever comes up, come talk to me. Exactly.
Yeah, that's just it. It sets the ground level for the fact of, I'm open to conversation. I'll talk with you openly and honestly about it. You're of age. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to come to me.
And I think guaranteed when a person does that.
And if I don't know the answer, and it's the same thing I used to tell the kids that I taught CCE to and stuff like that. If I don't know the answer, we have the big green book with us, and that'll give us the answer. And if we're confused about that, we can always go right up the street to the guy with the collar and ask him. Like, we got 3 different options here to be able to get an answer. All right? So now you have the resources.
My son is like,
Like, now you have the resources with which to get your answer.
Right.
You know, and that's just it. I think that is our job as parents, is to facilitate education. Like you said, Rusty, not to be helicopter parents, not to be overlording.
No.
Even with my 9-month-old baby, I let him have his time. You know, like I put him in his playpen with his toys and let him have his time. And yes, I'm interactive with him and I'm involved with him and I read stories to him and stuff like that. But I let him have his time to explore his world the way he wants to also.
Right.
So he doesn't solder all the time now, right?
No, not anymore. Once the basic skill is there, I let him decide. But
for sure.
It really is, because whenever I taught, and like I said, the name of the course was Sex and Sexuality, and we taught it in 7th grade to CCE, and it was a voluntary program that parents signed their kids up for, and they came for a Saturday afternoon, and we taught them, and it was mainly the church's view on sex and things like that, and the church teaching on it. But we also taught sexuality, and I think that is what is missing in our society when it comes to sex, is the concept of sexuality, of where do you fall within that? Where do you draw your lines? Where do you draw your boundaries? Where do you say personally enough is enough? Where do you personally say no? Where do you personally draw your lines? And that comes down to even when guys are sitting around a table and talking the way guys do. Right. Or when girls are sitting around a table and talking the way girls do. Right. You know, that you say, hey, man, that's too far.
Yeah.
You know, and it's okay to say, hey, man, I think that's too far. And teaching kids that if they say that, and their friends razz them about it, you may ought to reconsider your friends. Because this is something that you actively feel deeply about, and they can't appreciate that.
Sounds like some peer pressure stuff.
You know, and that's just it. It's learning to realize the fact that you have a voice, and that if people that you supposedly know and respect, your close circle of friends, don't agree with that, or don't jibe with that in some way, shape, or form, you may ought to reconsider that. Right. Are those really necessarily the people that you want to be with? You know, and that's okay to reconsider at any point in life. Like, good God, I'm 42 years old, and there are people in the last year and a half that I just don't really hang out with anymore, because what we believe as people is just too far apart. Yeah. Yeah. You know, they aren't open to conversation. They aren't open to a new paradigm.
The dialogue.
Yeah. You know, they're stuck in a meme, and they're stuck in a way of living, and they aren't willing to have, like you just said, Rusty, an open dialogue, an open discourse about a situation.
Can you imagine this online? And I mean, you got to be face to face, or at least talking verbally to a person, to actually get the whole content the way it was meant to be transcended. You know?
And that's just it. Like, and I'm no fool. I'm hip to what the kids do. Right. And I'm hip to the Snapchats. I'm hip to all that stuff. I know it exists. I know what kicking is. I also know what Netflix and chill means.
I'm still on the VHS.
And that's the thing. Those are the terms.
I'm still VHS.
But here's the thing. Those are the modern terms that, like, we as parents need to be hip to.
Right.
Like, we need to know what Netflix and chill means. Like, Netflix and chill is like, hey, let's hook up while we watch a movie that we don't care about.
I'm just going to so-and-so's house. We're just going to Netflix and chill.
Yeah.
Well, so let's think about this.
Go ahead.
Think about how think about how desensitized that is to the whole act of like making love to a girl. You know, I mean, like it's so depersonalized. It's
Yes.
not even like, you know, it doesn't insinuate like touch, doesn't insinuate closeness, doesn't insinuate love. It's just like a cold, disconnected, like, you know, code. I mean, there's no, I mean, you have to understand the idioms and insinuations behind that. But it's so disconnected, and that's just kind of where these kids are at, man. I mean, we're just kind of, they're bombarded by just detachment, you know, and they're so detached from each other and from emotions that they start, you know, moving towards these devices and using emojis to even express themselves. I know this kid that I was actually seeing at a school, and he asked a girl out and established being a girlfriend, boyfriend with her through texting, and had a whole array of emotions and like a whole array of expression through text.
Sure.
But then he said when he'd go up there and see her in the hallway, he'd be like, hey, and he'd raise his hand up and he'd walk beside her. And that's it. And that was their interaction. And they had no dialogue. They had no conversation. And then whenever they separated, it was like, okay, well, have a good day. And they separated, you know, then the text came and say, hey, you know, dude, that was so awesome. You're so pretty. You know, why can't we say those things? Like, can you say that to somebody and connect with them on an emotional level? Yeah. You know, I mean, we're missing that.
Well, and it's even gone to the point of, and I remember it from, I saw the example of it when my stepbrother, probably about a decade ago, we surprised my dad at Christmas time. My stepmother did. She took him to New York, and they surprised him because they were like, oh, Chris can't make it. He's busy, stuff like that. But they actually bought me a ticket to come to New York and meet my dad at Christmas time. And me and my stepbrother, who at the time was about 17, were just walking around late night in New York and stuff. And he's like, man, what is it up here? Like, I try to make eye contact and nobody wants to make eye contact with me. And I'm like, dude, you have to understand, you're in a different culture here. All right. Like, as opposed to Texas, where it's, hey, how you doing? And a wave to strangers at the door at Walmart. You know, and that unspoken head nod of, hey, how's it going? You know, and that eye contact. Like, here, this is like monkeys in the zoo. Like, you don't make eye contact. Like, if you make eye contact,
it's not even monkeys in a zoo. They're monkeys in a metal box.
Yeah.
And then they're tapping on the walls to communicate to each other.
Yeah,
They don't even see each other.
Yeah.
Right.
And just, much like in monkey society, like, eye contact is dangerous. You know, like that's an affront. Like, to them, you could be trying to mug them, all kinds of stuff. You know, so I was like, there's a totally different society that exists. You know, like, you can immediately spot the tourist in New York because they're the ones looking up.
You mean I can't look up?
People that live in New York are conditioned to it. They don't look up. Right, they aren't amazed by the huge buildings. So I was like, they can just by the fact that you were looking up before you tried to make eye contact, they already know you're just a tourist.
Oh,
you know,
that's a shame.
It's learning those subtleties of society that I think that the digital world is keeping us from. And is really setting us up for failure as a society in not even a certain sense, but a great sense.
You know, before Facebook and social media, I thought it was video games that was taking the lead on that, and I think now social media has.
It's not even video games anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, video games is like a whole other breed. Mm-hmm. It's because I mean, that's an additional. But you know what's crazy about video games is, you know, here's my kid sitting at home, and he's on the couch, and he has 6 other players, and they're all his friends from school. So they all convene on there. So it's a hybrid. It's dangerous. Yeah. Because you know, they're all hanging out. I mean, his friends there, all of them are there, and they're playing together, but they're not literally in front of each other's presence. Yeah. So it's hard to say, okay, you can't play video games, because that's like saying you can't play with your friends. And then you know, so it takes more effort to even try to go see them outside of school. But then you get into the whole, everybody's too busy to hang out, and you only catch them from time to time on the video game. So it's really bizarre. I think video game play and the way that it's set up and how it's like a phone, if you will.
Especially the way it has morphed. Because don't get me wrong, like back in the day when we grew up, even Steven, yourself, we had video games, but you had to physically be in the room with the person that you were either taking turns with or playing multiplayer with.
Right.
Even within 64, where you could have 4 people playing, you all had to be on the same console.
Right.
It wasn't until games like Doom and Quake and stuff like that where you started playing online against other people.
Right.
And yeah, like you said, I see it all the time whenever I go visit my nephews and stuff like that. They're playing with their buddies. But they also, my brother encourages sleepover nights. Like game nights. Come on over, sleep over. We'll order some pizza. We'll set up the friggin' Xbox out in the backyard with the sound system and the projector.
Right.
And you guys can all sit back and play multiplayer mode.
I think that's an awesome thing.
You know?
Yeah, yeah. And you know, because that is social. You're all there. There was a kid over, at my office the other day. He was going over to a friend's on Friday, and he was picking up his Xbox with his control and his wires, and he took his TV over there too. I mean, that's acceptable, right?
Yeah.
But look at how dangerous this is, and like how much of a hybrid it is to the real world.
Yeah.
We busted out the Nintendo Wii the other day. We're playing Mario Kart with kids, and the internet. I pulled the plug on the internet. That's what I told the kids. I was like, oh, I guess I must have forgotten to pay the bill.
Yeah.
Because that guy got him off their phone, right?
Nice.
So we busted out the Wii. And like here we are playing Wii, and we're laughing and like getting mad at each other. Like, hey, you did that to me, and you don't, and you own it. You own all of it.
Yeah.
You own the CD. You can play as many times as you want. Here's another dangerous component of this video game and online play. You have to pay money for stuff, dude.
Yeah.
Like real money.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want a Ferrari,
money.
you want a motorcycle, you want a bigger house.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to like load money. Like
you got to pay like $10 in
then,
credits to be able to get some upgrades and stuff like that.
That's what I didn't understand. I went to a friend's house. It's a mutual friend, Nelson, and he had Grand Theft Auto, and he was like, "Let me do it." And we were feeling good, and he was like, "Hey man, don't wreck my car, dude. That's an expensive car you're driving there." And he took it serious, and I'm like, "What is this dude taking this shit serious?" And I wrecked that sucker, man. I totaled that.
That costs him. If you wreck it yourself, you have to pay $20,000 to get it back of your own money.
That's what he was saying.
Your online virtual money.
Yeah.
So that means that it actually equates to real money. If somebody else wrecks it for you, then they have to pay a something amount. But if you wreck it, you have to pay your own money, and it's $20,000, which equates to like maybe about $7-8, but still,
this is taking the fun out of it.
I know, and that's just it.
It does, but that's the danger. Is that there's things that continue to fool the mind into believing that all that stuff is real.
Yes.
Hey, you know what I want to mention real quick, man?
Go ahead.
I heard it was over the weekend. It was a show that talked about guns and why are there so many guns, and there's a big debate about it, gun control, and people are saying, I've heard on one side, if you take guns away, well, they'll still do it with bats and knives and bricks. It's not the gun, it's the intention. And people are saying, no, if you make it harder to get a gun, then it won't happen. But let me ask you something.
Go ahead.
And I want you to think about this, because this is my own thought. We're in a country where we've been in war just about every decade of the history of this place since the Korean War.
No.
And we've consistently been in a war, right?
Since World War I almost.
Since World War I even. So consistently within a decade or two, consistently been involved in some sort of war altercation, and it's on the media. So let me ask you something. So if this country, and we're consistently at war, and there's consistently updates on war, you don't really see much on the media, mainstream media, about what's going on over there anymore. But if that's being ingrained in us, then why aren't people thinking about guns?
Yeah.
I mean, right? I mean, doesn't it make sense that if we're a country at war consistently, and there's a consistent, you have family that's going off to war, you've got family that's been in war, and you're hearing about it, wouldn't that equate to like why there's so much of a gun talk and there's so much interest in guns? You think that maybe there's an association to the fact that this country has always been surrounded and involved with war and weaponry and carnage and things like that, by default. I mean, I love this country. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, like, if they're wondering where it's coming from, I mean, look back at our history. Look back at the history of this country, and is that a viable argument? How come we have, how come we have so much of an issue with guns?
If perhaps we didn't have war shoved in our face for the last smooth 50 years. Since easily, like you said, Korea, from that point on is when media became entrenched, with especially Vietnam on is when media truly became entrenched, like
World War II?
As far as news and stuff like that. Well, they had news reels,
right,
but those were films that were produced that took a little bit of time. By the time you saw something, it was a couple weeks later. With Vietnam, we had the first like NBC news correspondents,
right,
like out in the field that gave reports and stuff like that, and especially from Desert Storm on. In the 90s. If you remember, Al Franken made fun of it on Saturday Night Live, where he was like the CNN guy with the helmet and the dish, and he was out in Iraq. Like, I'm out here right now. But
I remember that.
That has been ingrained in our society and in the minds of our children.
Some of the first, and I want to say it was the first live news reporting, live to television, was during the Patty Hearst. The Patty Hearst thing. It came out just recently in the documentary that's being done, that's being aired. And it was the new technology they were using at the time. And it was live, huge equipment they carried on their backs. And all this. Huge.
I mean, while they were covering all that.
And it was live. That was the first live.
But that wasn't like live footage from a war zone.
Well, it was at the house that was, the bullets were going by their heads. But
And, it's...
SLA was held up in the house shooting at them.
It's, seeing that come to light, seeing war come to our television screen on the daily, like Rusty says, like I said earlier, it's a desensitizing action. It's something that absolutely makes it the norm. It makes it a point of normalcy in our society. And like Rusty said, that is a dangerous point. That's a dangerous precipice to be at as a society, to see these things as the norm instead of the exception to the rule.
And what's happening is it's flying right past our radar as parents. It's flying right past our radar. We're more concerned with AP classes. We're more concerned with keeping these kids so busy and on the top of their game so they can have a career for themselves. There's an anxiety to putting so much pressure on these kids. And so they're going to be filtered out real quickly. You'll see the ones that aren't making it and the ones that can hang and the ones that are thriving. You'll see that very, very predominantly. And is that another trigger for, not being accepted and being upset and angry? Think about this shooter in Florida. Dead parents and grew up foster home, and I'm not sure what all the background was in this kid. But let me tell you something else. You know how this kid got into school, and I know this because, and you won't hear about this on the news, but my cousin's kids went to that school.
You were telling me that.
My cousin's son actually lost a friend, his best friend, who he just saw in the band hall, and said, "Hey, what's up? What are you doing?" He goes, "Sorry, I'm just waiting for my ride." I was like, "All right, see you later, man." And then like 2 minutes later, that's when the shooting ensued. And my cousin's kid was actually walking home. You know how this kid got inside the school? He didn't go through the front door. He went through the window. He crawled through a window, and so they had things in place and measures in place. And that's how this kid got in, And so when people think, oh, well, we need better security, we don't know, really. And it's not about trying to fix the school system. It's not about trying to fix, gun control. It's about getting back to the basics of teaching our kids and reaching out to others in need and bringing back compassion. We can't let compassion become extinct with these kids.
Yes, exactly.
And that's something that we just need to get back to the basics teach them how to be compassionate and have a sense of empathy. So we don't see this bull crap of, oh, well, this school's going to get shot up tomorrow.
Right. We're being ruled by fear.
We're missing. Exactly. And you don't even parent by fear either. You don't parent by shaming. But we need to really teach these kids a sense of empathy. And you know what's going to happen is a lot of the kids that are getting that and are being raised that way are going to be, I think, victims of belittling, victims of mistreatment and misunderstanding because somebody else isn't doing their job as well.
Absolutely. I could not agree with that statement more, Rusty. It's so much so that I'd like to read a paragraph that I posted on February 20th on my timeline on Facebook. And it goes, yes, someday my son will absolutely be in harm's way, no less than I was. He will face the same things. I am not any more afraid of my son attending school on the daily than my mother was for me walking there by myself through the gauntlet of bullies and dope users. The only difference is my son will be a bit more educated to options and survival skills to help him in such situations. There are far more people on the road still drunk from the night before than those carrying guns. That does not mean I will not let my child cross the street. I simply refuse to live a life of fear or teach my child to do so. Children fully adopt the fears their parents have. This is how racism thrives. This is how ignorance thrives. We must learn to have educated conversations with our children, not simply preach fearful rhetoric to them. Let's do the math of the number of students attending school in the U.S. every day and compare it to the number shot daily. His chances of living are pretty damn good. I'm in no way discounting the recent loss of life, but literally a couple years ago in Houston, a student went nuts at Lone Star College, stabbing almost 4 people to death. That was done with an X-Acto knife for art class. Not a gun, not a butcher knife, but a piece of art equipment required for class. When that was wrestled away from him, a couple of other students were injured with his compass from geometry class. The issue here is society, our resolution of conflicts and willingness to use violence as a mean to achieve an end. It has nothing to do with the weapon used. Want to solve the problem, put armed police and the right to detain in schools and metal detectors at the door. But it's more than that. It's about education, like what we're saying. It's about talking to your children. It's about giving them coping skills. It's about letting them understand that bullies are going to be bullies. Jerks are going to be jerks.
Right.
Your boss is going to be a jerk. You cannot resolve situations by violence.
And knowing
violence
the value
does not
of life
solve a situation.
is knowing how precious it is.
Yeah. And that's just it. It speaks to the point that Rusty was just talking about, where we need to instill a sense of empathy back into our society. The fact of sympathy is great. We can feel sorry for people all day.
Right.
But that doesn't help us advance.
Right.
What helps us advance is learning to understand somebody else's life, learning to understand where they are coming from, the life that they have lived that has formed them into the person that they are.
Right.
Exactly right, man. So heavy.
And I think that is exactly why I wanted you to come on tonight, Rusty, to talk about these situations, because you are a behavioral therapist. That's exactly what behavioral therapists do, is they see these things going on and they give people the coping mechanisms to change their behavior, to change the way they view the world around them, so that they can be more balanced people, so that they can have a more balanced view of the world that encroaches on everybody on the daily. So with that note, Rusty, explain to people real quick a little bit about behavioral therapy again, what it is that behavioral therapy does, and what they can do to go about checking into behavioral therapy for kids that they know that may be in need, things like that? What kind of things can they do within their school, within their community, within their family to get people the help that they need?
Right. Well, one of the things that I utilize most is I defer to a program or an approach called cognitive behavioral therapy. And cognitive theory is it's a standalone theory that addresses, it's a therapeutic theoretical approach that addresses the way a person thinks. Behavior theory is the conditioned responses and looking at why we have the behaviors that we have. Is it a stimulus? It's a series of learned behaviors that we've experienced over the course of living, and those become the primal reason why we have why we experience things is because they're learned. We combine the two, and I'm not combining them, but there's an actual combination of the two called cognitive behavioral therapy. And when you call a counselor and you want help for yourself, ask what their theoretical orientation is. When you ask somebody that, you're asking them, what theory are you using to help me? What are you going to use? What kind of theory? And so it's really important that you know who you're going to, because if somebody says, well, I'm eclectic, I use a little bit of everything. Now, well, that's great. I mean, that's great knowledge, but cognitive behavioral therapy.
Pretty unfocused.
Yes, it's not focused. Cognitive behavioral therapy works on the way an individual thinks and the way that they behave, and it actually works on trying to help develop and establish goals to change both of those patterns, thinking and behavior. It's very, very important, very broad, very effective approach. But looking at like why it works, well, I mean, I think that there's no set rebuttals. There are lots of schematics within that approach that help an individual, but the crux of it all is that you want to address the way that you're thinking about things and give you coping skills and give you things that you can do, practical things. Some people just want to go in and just talk and they feel better. Some people need some advice, and they need maybe not advice, but they need some techniques and things that they can actually use. And that's what we're designed to help them with.
Well, and not only that, you also have the fear gauntlet, as I call it. And explain to everybody a little bit about what the cognitive gymnasium is that you have, where you go in and gather the stressors, the biofeedback information. This is where the biofeedback part of the Center for Biofeedback and Behavioral Therapy comes from. Because not only are you doing a behavioral therapy where you're teaching people how to recognize situations as they come up and giving them coping skills, but you're actively using technology to find where people get stressed out and how they get stressed out. Explain a little bit behind that technology and what it's all about for our listeners.
Absolutely. Well, biofeedback is the second component of what we do, and that's essentially teaching an individual how to control their body, to control their emotional state. And what the big emphasis is teaching them how to relax through situations, and so that they're not overwhelmed, and they recognize themselves what they're doing that could be resulting in so much of the issues that they're having or the discomforts. So we teach them how to use body techniques, breathing techniques, body techniques, relaxation strategies, and so one of the specialties or our secret formula that we've seen that I've seen that has just kind of worked is, we're going after a condition like anxiety, anger control, or impulse control, or fear or pain issues. A lot of this training is done in a quiet room. Well, that's not really effective when it comes to showing a generalization of skills. So, if you're learning anxiety techniques and you're learning breathing and body techniques as copers, well, they work as long as the conditions are right. You have no experience and you don't have any idea how they're going to work outside of that quiet room. So what we've done is we created a gymnasium that's an indoor obstacle course. It's a series of swings. And what they do is the individual has to move from one swing to the other without touching the ground. It's a physical demanding. It's not too bad. It's actually kind of fun. But what we do is we turn off the lights, and then we have like a club environment, flickering, flashing, strobing lights, moving headlights that are kind of, jostling around everywhere. And we're overstimulating the brain. We're making it hard to think, which is then creating a massive amount of stress. And then what we do is we hook them up to a biofeedback machine, see if they can use their techniques to calm themselves down. And then, and if they're getting the same results that they're getting in the room, we can safely say and confidently say, look, if you can use these techniques in an environment like this, then you can use them in your English class. You can use them at work. You can use them wherever. Right. So, but that's essentially what our process is like and what we work on. And we've had a lot of great success and some pretty good media coverage on the stuff that we do.
Yeah, no, you guys have been featured on Telemundo. You guys have been featured on all kinds of national programs for the work that you do and how you're doing it. It's actually absolutely groundbreaking stuff. Tell everybody before we go out here, Rusty, where they can go to find out your information, where they can go to find out more about the Center for Biofeedback and Behavioral Therapy.
My website is w.onlinebiofeedback.com. And you can find all of our media there, and you can kind of click through and you can find our contact information and read our testimonials. And we have testimonials from people that have come in from South Africa, from doctors, from individuals who've come from Ohio and different areas of the country, and they leave their experiences with us. And so anyways, and it has a lot of really good media, and also my radio show, the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano. Chris has recently helped me get it all set up so that it's all there. If you want to listen to any of my, yeah, thank you, man. Any of my previous recorded shows, I'm with iHeart Radio here in Dallas, but I'm on hiatus now and just kind of, reworking how I want to do things and just taking a break and just living on the dream, but my number is 469-358-1309. You guys, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Absolutely. And I'd like you to hang on for just a minute, Rusty. We're getting ready to go out, but thank you so much for coming on tonight, sharing this information, sharing Rusty. The ideas of coping mechanism, things like that with our audience of parents out there. It's so important to be able to have open, honest, unfettered conversation with your children. Where you can sit down and actively talk with them. Capital T, guys. I mean, it's so important.
It starts there in the most effective.
It's back to the basics.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really, really about true conversation. So once again, be open. Thank you so much, Rusty, for coming on tonight. Hold on with us till the end of the show. We'd like to talk with you afterward. Make sure to go on by the Center for Biofeedback. That is Center for Biofeedback and Behavioral Therapy.com. You can check out Rusty on iHeartRadio. The Therapy Hour is the name of the show. While you are online checking out Rusty's awesome stuff, make sure to go by dudesandbeer.com. Check out all of our new stuff. We've started a new blog called Jumping to Conclusions, where literally we jump to conclusions about things going on in the media and the world around us. It just kind of gives us a chance to rabbit hole a little bit further than what we do in the show. In addition to that, we are also now posting all of our news of our Week in the News segments. So whenever you hear us talk about the Week in the News, feel free to go on by dudesandbeer.com/news and check out every single one of those news articles. There are links there. You can click on the title. It'll take you straight to the article. You can read everything about all the stuff that's going on in your world. We've got the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football League coming up this fall.
Can't wait on that one.
Can't wait to have that going on.
Gotta figure that out.
We have to say a huge, huge, huge thank you to Jeff Lipton and the folks over at Babalu Cigars for our 150th episode last week. Sick. That was just, just the fact that we'd have hit 150 to begin with. It's not our 3rd year anniversary. Don't get me wrong, folks. Our 3rd year anniversary is technically...
Who stays as persistent as
It's technically the 27th of July every year.
Yeah.
27th of July is when we made our first post on Dudes and Beer. That is the official 3rd anniversary.
That's every Tuesday, and we don't skip a day. We don't skip a week.
Well, we've skipped a couple weeks here and there, but we've also had stuff like Meekum.
Yeah.
We've also had stuff like Meekum and another show. So, I mean, there is sometimes we put out more than 52 in a year. Sometimes we put out less. But we just had 150 at Babalu, and we're very happy to say that we will soon be having some giveaways from Babalu Cigars.
Everybody was happy.
Some discount codes. Everybody had a great time. Thank you so much to Jeff Gottlieb for coming on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Jeff Lipton for coming on the show. For the roller that was there, making awesome cigars. For the other guys that showed up, Charlie Pelletier, Richard Adams, Dean Larrañaga, everybody else, all the regulars that were there. Thank you so much. It made it a great night. And make sure to go on and check us out online, folks. Dudesandbeer.com is the website.
Where?
That's where you can find everything, all the episodes, all the good stuff. Thank you so much again to Rusty, our guest tonight.
Oh, Rusty.
Make sure to check everything out. Until next time, everybody, remember, if you can't be good, be good at it. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Podcast. To listen to our audio streams or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.